Hello and welcome to Laila's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Laila, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Laila as she explores the magical Italian city of Florence. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. Laila woke to church bells and morning light filtering through the shutters of her hotel room. She opened them wide and Florence greeted her, terracotta roofs stretching away in every direction. The Duomo's massive dome rising above them all, the green and white marble of its exterior catching the April sun. The air that came through the window was mild and fresh, carrying the scent of spring flowers and coffee from somewhere nearby. April in Florence meant the city at its most beautiful, she'd been told. Warm but not hot, the wisteria beginning to bloom, the tourists present but not yet overwhelming, the light perfect for seeing art and architecture. She dressed simply in comfortable clothes suitable for walking and looking at beauty, gathered her small bag with water and sunscreen, and headed down to the hotel's breakfast room. The breakfast was Italian and generous: fresh cornetti, yogurt with honey, fruit, espresso that was dark and strong. She ate on a small terrace overlooking a courtyard garden where roses were budding and herbs grew in terracotta pots. Other guests spoke in low tones, respecting the morning quiet, the international mix of languages creating a gentle music. After breakfast, she stepped out of the hotel into the Florentine morning. Her hotel was in a residential neighborhood not far from the city center, on a quiet street lined with tall buildings in ochre and cream, their shutters painted in blues and greens. She began walking toward the heart of Florence, following the general flow of streets that led toward the Duomo. The city revealed itself gradually. The residential streets gave way to more commercial areas, small shops opening their doors, florists arranging displays, cafes setting out their sidewalk tables. An older woman swept the pavement in front of her building with methodical care. A delivery man on a scooter navigated the narrow street with practiced ease, boxes balanced precariously behind him. The buildings were beautiful in that particularly Florentine way. Renaissance palazzos with rusticated stone ground floors and elegant upper stories, medieval towers incorporated into later structures, churches with geometric marble facades. Every surface seemed to carry decoration: carved stone, painted plaster, wrought iron balconies with climbing plants. She turned a corner, and suddenly the Duomo appeared, filling her vision. Even though she'd seen photographs, the reality was overwhelming. The sheer size of it, the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, with its red tile dome dominating the skyline, the facade, a riot of white, pink and green marble in geometric patterns, the separate baptistry and bell tower completing the complex. Laila stood in the Piazza del Duomo, looking up, trying to take it all in. The dome, Brunelleschi's masterpiece, was an engineering marvel and a work of art, its ribs visible from the outside, its scale almost impossible to comprehend. The bell tower, Giotto's campanile, rose beside it, more delicate but equally impressive, covered in the same marble patterns, its windows and decorations following a mathematical precision that was both beautiful and intellectually satisfying. The piazza was already busy despite the early hour. Tourists photographing the buildings from every angle, local workers crossing on their way to offices, street vendors beginning to set up their carts, selling scarves and prints and souvenirs. Lila walked slowly around the cathedral, seeing it from different. The side facing the baptistry showed the famous bronze doors, copies now, the originals preserved in a museum, depicting scenes from the Bible in such detail and artistry that Michelangelo had supposedly called them worthy to be the gates of paradise. She decided not to go inside the cathedral yet. She wanted to walk through the city first, to get a sense of Florence before focusing on individual sites. So she continued on, walking toward the Arno River, following streets that descended gently. The streets of central Florence were narrow and shadowed, buildings rising high on both sides, creating canyons that channeled the breeze and provided relief from the sun. Every building seemed historic. Every corner held some architectural detail worth noticing. A carved coat of arms above a doorway, a medieval tower incorporated into a later facade, a tabernacle with a painting of the Madonna set into a wall at an intersection. She passed shops selling leather goods, Florence's traditional craft, jackets and bags, wallets and belts, the leather soft and beautifully made, the smell of it distinctive and pleasant. She passed paper shops selling marbled paper and handmade journals, the traditional Florentine decorative papers still being made using centuries-old techniques. The Arno appeared ahead, the river flowing brown and steady through the city, spanned by multiple bridges. She walked toward the Ponte Vecchio, the old bridge that was Florence's most famous, lined with shops built directly on the bridge itself, the medieval custom of using bridge space for commerce still continuing. The bridge was already crowded with tourists and shoppers, the shops selling mostly jewelry now, gold gleaming in the windows. But the structure itself was what interested Lila, the way the shops jutted out over the water, supported by wooden brackets, the covered corridor running above them that had once allowed the Medici to walk from their palace to their offices without mixing with common people, the whole thing having survived floods and wars and centuries of use. She walked across the bridge, pausing in the middle where there was a gap in the shops, a space that allowed views up and down the river. Upstream other bridges were visible, and the hills beyond the city, green with spring growth. Downstream the river curved away, boats moored along its banks, buildings rising directly from the water's edge. The light on the water was beautiful, dancing and shifting, and she stood watching it for a while, the movement hypnotic, the sound of flowing water audible beneath the noise of the crowd. On the other side of the river, the Oltrarno neighborhood felt different, quieter, more residential, with artisan workshops and smaller shops, a more local feeling despite the tourists who ventured across. Lila walked through its streets, enjoying the change of pace, seeing Florence from a different perspective. She found the Palazzo Pitti, the massive Renaissance palace that had belonged to Florence's ruling families, now a museum complex. The building was imposing, its rusticated stone facade powerful and somewhat austere, the courtyard beyond visible through the entrance arch. She made a note to perhaps return here later, but for now she continued exploring. Behind the palace, the Boboli Gardens offered green space and respite from the stone and streets. She climbed the hillside, the garden spreading across the slope in a series of terraces and grottos, fountains and sculptures, formal plantings and wilder areas where wisteria grew over stone walls, its purple flowers hanging in fragrant cascades. The gardens were peaceful, the tourists spreading out enough that it was easy to find quiet corners. She walked slowly through them, climbing to higher terraces that offered views over Florence, the Duomo visible from here, the city spread below the hills beyond. She found a bench in the shade of a cypress tree and sat, looking out at the view. Birds sang from the trees around her, their songs complex and varied. A gardener worked nearby, pruning roses with careful attention, his movements practiced and efficient. The scent of flowers was everywhere, roses and lavender, wisteria, and something else she couldn't identify, but that smelled like honey and lemons. After resting in the gardens, she made her way back down to the Oltrarno streets and found a small trattoria for lunch. It was early still, but she was hungry from the morning's walking. The trattoria was family-run, the kind of place where locals ate, with paper placemats and simple wooden tables, no pretension, but evident care. The waiter, a man with kind eyes and laugh lines, brought her a menu.
Buongiorno, signora. Desidera qualcosa da bere?
Un'acqua minerale, per favore. Frizzante.
Subito.
He returned with the sparkling water and gave her a moment to look at the menu. She chose ribollita, the traditional Tuscan soup made with bread and vegetables, and a glass of Chianti from a local vineyard. The soup arrived steaming in a wide bowl, thick with kale and beans, chunks of bread softened into it, a drizzle of olive oil on top. It was peasant food elevated to art, simple ingredients combined with skill and tradition to create something deeply satisfying. The wine was earthy and robust, exactly right with the hearty soup. She ate slowly, savoring the flavors, watching the trattoria fill with the lunch crowd. Workers from nearby shops came in, clearly regulars, greeting the family who ran the restaurant by name. An elderly couple ate in companionable silence, occasionally offering each other tastes from their plates. A young mother fed her toddler while trying to eat her own meal, the universal dance of parenting. After lunch, Lila crossed back over the Arno, this time using a different bridge, and made her way toward the Piazza della Signoria, Florence's main civic square. The walk took her through more of the city's historic streets, past the imposing palazzo facades, where wealthy families had lived, past churches and towers, past small museums and galleries. The Piazza della Signoria opened before her, grand and theatrical. The Palazzo Vecchio dominated one side, its fortress-like medieval tower rising above the square, the building a symbol of Florence's civic pride and Republican traditions. The Loggia dei Lanzi offered an open-air sculpture gallery, Renaissance and Roman works displayed under arches, including a dramatic Perseus holding Medusa's head. But what drew Lila's attention most was the copy of Michelangelo's David standing before the Palazzo Vecchio. Even knowing it was a copy, the original was in the Accademia Gallery. The statue was powerful. The young hero, confident and alert, his body perfectly proportioned, the marble seeming to have the warmth and suppleness of living flesh, despite being stone. She sat on the steps of the loggia, looking at the David and the Neptune fountain, and the various statues that populated the square, thinking about Florence's artistic legacy. This was the city that had given birth to the Renaissance, where art and science and humanistic thought had flourished, where beauty had been cultivated as both ideal and practice. The square was busy with tourists and tour guides, street performers and caricature artists, but Lila found she could tune out the modern noise and imagine the square in earlier times, when Savonarola had held his bonfire of the vanities here, when political assemblies had gathered, when the David had first been placed here as a symbol of the Republic's strength and virtue. After a She knew the collection was vast and overwhelming, that people could spend days there and not see everything, but she wanted to see at least some of the masterpieces. The entrance was through the courtyard, a long narrow space between two wings of the building, opening at the far end with a view of the Arno. She purchased a ticket and began making her way through the galleries. The collection was staggering. Botticelli's Birth of Venus and Primavera, paintings she'd seen reproduced countless times, but which in person had a luminosity and presence that no reproduction could capture. Leonardo's Annunciation, with its precise observation and revolutionary composition. Michelangelo's Doni Tondo, the Holy Family rendered with HIS characteristic power and dynamism. She moved slowly through the rooms, not trying to see everything, but pausing where something caught her attention, letting herself be drawn to particular works. A Caravaggio with its dramatic lighting. A Raphael Madonna, tender and serene. Titian's Venus of Urbino, sensual and direct. The museum was busy but manageable. Groups moving through with guides, individuals pausing where they chose, the atmosphere one of reverence for art, people speaking in hushed tones, respecting the space and what it contained. After a couple of hours, Lila felt saturated with beauty and imagery, her mind full. She made her way out of the museum and back into the afternoon light, blinking slightly at the brightness after the controlled lighting inside. She walked along the Arno, following the river upstream, enjoying the exercise after the stillness of the museum. The river bank was lined with trees showing spring green, their new leaves bright and fresh. People sat on benches or on the low walls, reading or talking or simply watching the water flow. She found a gelateria that looked authentic. Locals in line were always a good sign, and ordered a cone with 2 flavors, pistachio and stracciatella. The gelato was creamy and intense, the pistachio tasting actually of pistachios, the stracciatella studded with shavings of dark chocolate. She ate it as she walked, enjoying the contrast of the cold sweetness with the warm afternoon. The light was beginning to shift toward late afternoon, that golden quality that painters loved, when everything seemed touched with warmth. She made her way back toward the Duomo, wanting to see it in this different light, to experience the cathedral properly before her day ended. The piazza was less crowded now, the two groups thinned, the light painting the marble facade in golden tones. She went inside the cathedral, where the interior was cool and dim after the bright exterior, vast and somewhat austere despite the scale. The space was impressive in its simplicity, huge columns supporting soaring arches, painted windows filtering colored light, the floor, a geometric pattern of marble. She walked the length of the nave, looking up at the dome from below, seeing Vasari's frescoes of the Last Judgment covering the interior of the dome, tiny figures in swirling compositions hundreds of feet above. She sat in a pew, not praying but simply absorbing the space, the sense of human aspiration represented here. The dome alone had been an extraordinary achievement, its construction requiring innovations in engineering and art, Brunelleschi's genius solving problems that had seemed insurmountable. After a while she left the cathedral and walked to the baptistry, the octagonal building that was actually older than the cathedral, dating to the 11th century. Inside, the ceiling was covered with golden mosaics depicting biblical scenes, the gold glowing in the dim light, the artistry Byzantine in style but Florentine in execution. She stood in the center, slowly turning to see all the scenes, Christ in judgment, scenes from Genesis, the life of John the Baptist. The mosaic seemed to float in the darkness, the gold creating light rather than reflecting it, the faces solemn and stylized, speaking across centuries. Emerging back into the late afternoon, she decided to climb the bell tower for the view. The climb was steep and long, narrow stairs winding upward through the interior, with small windows at intervals offering glimpses of the city. She climbed steadily, pausing at landings to catch her breath and look out. At the top, the view was worth every step. Florence spread below in all directions, the terracotta roofs creating a textured pattern, the Arno winding through, the green hills beyond, the Duomo's dome so close she could see every detail of its construction, the lantern at its peak, seeming almost within reach. The light was golden now, the sun lowering toward the hills, painting everything in warm tones. Other visitors were at the top, everyone speaking softly, awed by the view, taking photographs but also just looking, trying to commit the scene to memory. Lila walked around the top of the tower, seeing Florence from every angle, the Palazzo Vecchio's tower to one side, the hills of Fiesole to another, the river reflecting the evening light, the city spreading away toward the countryside, red roofs giving way gradually to green fields. She remained at the top until the sun touched the hills, watching the light change, seeing Florence transform in the golden hour. Then she began the descent, the stairs easier going down but requiring care, her legs tired from the day's walking. At the bottom, evening was settling over the city. The streetlights were beginning to come on, shops were closing or preparing for the evening, restaurants were opening for dinner. The Duomo's facade was illuminated, dramatic against the darkening sky. Lila walked slowly back toward her hotel, taking a meandering route through streets she hadn't explored yet, discovering new corners, seeing evening life beginning. People were out for the passeggiata, the traditional evening stroll, families and couples walking, greeting friends, stopping to chat, enjoying the mild evening. She passed a small church where a concert was beginning, the sound of violin and cello drifting out into the street, someone performing Vivaldi, the music perfect for Florence, for spring, for evening. She paused outside, listening for a few moments, the music adding another layer to the day's beauty. Near her hotel, she found a wine bar that looked welcoming, its entrance warm with light, a few tables outside occupied by people enjoying aperitivo. She went in and ordered a glass of Vernaccia, a white wine from nearby San Gimignano, and the bartender brought it with a small plate of olives and focaccia. She sat at a small table by the window, sipping her wine, watching the street outside. The wine was crisp and mineral, refreshing after the long day. The focaccia was still warm, studded with rosemary, the olive oil it had been baked with seeping slightly into the paper it was wrapped in. She thought about the day, about all she'd seen, the overwhelming beauty of the Duomo, the art in the Uffizi, the quiet of the Boboli Gardens, the view from the bell tower. Florence had lived up to its reputation, had offered beauty at every turn, had reminded her why art mattered, why humans created beautiful things, why we decorated churches and palaces and bridges, why we made sculpture and painting and architecture that aspired to more than mere function. The city was a living museum, but also a living city, where people worked and raised families, and went about their daily lives surrounded by extraordinary beauty. The Renaissance ideal of beauty as a value in itself, as something worth pursuing and preserving, still present in the stones and streets. She finished her wine and stepped back out into the evening. The walk to her hotel was short. through quiet streets where restaurants were filling with diners, where voices and laughter drifted from open windows, where the day was transitioning to night but gently without rush. At her hotel, she climbed the stairs to her room, her legs pleasantly tired, her mind full of images. She opened the shutters wide, letting in the evening air, and sat in the chair by the window, looking out at the neighborhood. Lights glowed in windows across the way, families visible in their routines, someone cooking in a kitchen, children doing homework at a table, a couple having an animated discussion. The domestic scenes were comforting, a reminder that beauty existed not just in museums and churches, but in the daily life of the city, in the way people lived and connected and created their own small works of art in the living of each day. The church bells rang again, marking the evening hour, their tones layered and musical, echoing through the streets. The sound was ancient and continuous, the same bells that had rung through centuries, marking time, calling people to prayer or simply reminding them of their presence. Lila sat by the window as the evening deepened, watching the city settle, feeling grateful for Florence and its gifts. The art and architecture, yes, but also the gelato and the ribollita, the wisteria in the gardens and the light on the Arno, the climb up the tower and the view from the top, the music drifting from the church and the passeggiata through evening streets. All of it together created something that was more than just sightseeing, more than just tourism. It was an encounter with beauty itself, with the human capacity to create and preserve and share beautiful things, with the way art and life could interweave, could enhance each other, could create a whole that was greater than its parts. The City of the Lily, Florence was called, after the flower on its coat of arms. And like a lily, it was both delicate and strong, beautiful but enduring, something that bloomed each spring but whose roots went deep into history, drawing sustenance from centuries of artistic achievement, of humanistic values, of the belief that beauty mattered, that it was worth pursuing and protecting and passing on to future generations. Lila remained at her window as night fully arrived, watching Florence glow under its lights, peaceful and artistic and timeless, a gift to anyone willing to walk its streets and climb its towers, and pause to look and appreciate what had been created here. What was still being created here, the ongoing dialogue between past and present, between beauty and life, between art and the human heart,